Hi, I'm Gabrielle, Carteris, president of SAG-AFTRA.
And I'm David White, National Executive Director of SAG-AFTRA.
And we welcome you to the SAG-AFTRA podcast. Sitting next to me here is Rebecca Damon. She's our special guest today. She's the Executive Vice President of SAG-AFTRA as well as the local president of New York. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, Gabrielle. Hi, David.
Hello.
Hey. She's actually our computer technology wonk. That's what I like to call her. She loves technology, and she'll be in this conversation with us. We're exploring emerging technologies that are impacting real people and especially our members. From the artificial intelligence that allows computers to replicate people's images and voices like we saw in Star Wars, to the new business models and distribution platforms, it's clear that entertainment is changing rapidly. David, you talked to us as a national board and a convention a lot about FANG. So why don't you tell us what FANG is?
There are two responses to that. One is FANG, what it stands for, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google/YouTube for our purposes here. But FANG is also the term that has entered popular culture and the popular mindset for those companies that are leading the emerging world economy, leading the changes in technology that affect our lives as consumers, and more to the point for today's conversation, workers. And it's causing a lot of not only excitement, but great disruption, and we're all responding to that.
I think that unions actually, I love the fact is that we're really in the forefront of that conversation. Rebecca and I had the opportunity to go to Carnegie Mellon to look at technologies.
Yes.
And I thought it was a really interesting trip. I didn't know Pittsburgh was so into robotics and the technology that's going on there, but I left with a lot of new realizations. I don't know, Rebecca, if you could share with us some of the thoughts that you had when you left there.
Yeah, absolutely. That trip actually helped solidify for me a lot of the things that you two have been talking about, leading on as the organization, which I just think is terrific because so many organizations actually are very much responsive to technology, whereas SAG-AFTRA, with the work that you're doing, David, and our IT and innovation departments are really looking at how it impacts us as members. So at Carnegie Mellon, that was a wonderful experience. It was also great to sort of see how all this will intersect with us as workers. So they had things like robotic tutors, and you might think, what does that have to do with actors and broadcast singers and all the rest of it? But some of the technology actually had facial responsive recognition, that they could sense the mood. They would be able to understand how people were responding to things. And you can see, obviously, countless, some obvious applications like alternate endings for video games, depending on what the person is thinking. But you can see other applications for our members. All of the work that they're doing and our ability to make sure that we are tracking all of this, whether it's places like that or other organizations, it is so imperative in what we do. So I'm really grateful that we're out in front on all of this.
Oh, I agree. I think it's been, David, you even say we're dealing with this not only with Carnegie Mellon, which was exciting, but actually in all different levels of our industry and outside of the industry.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I'm jealous that I wasn't able to go with you all to Carnegie Mellon. What we are facing, this intersection that we like to refer to, the intersection between Silicon Valley and Hollywood, as an example. It used to be that content was created here in Hollywood psychologically, meaning it can be produced anywhere on the planet, but the companies that really controlled content creation and distribution were based here, and the rules around that were based here in the entertainment industry. And now that what used to be a 30-second commercial on television is now an 11-second commercial on Facebook, now that my daughter, who is 9, watches content that is created by some other child based somewhere, and that is her entertainment, in addition to what she might be watching on Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel, etc. We are all grappling with the tectonic shifts going on underneath the industry. So when Rebecca refers to facial recognition technology, that is a suite, if you will, of technological changes that come into content creation. So this is a slightly different technology, but Deepfakes is a word that we use for technology that allows someone to take a picture and to replicate that picture without authorization and to place it into moving pictures. So the prime example of that is taking somebody famous and putting that person's famous face in a pornographic film. But there are so many other ways of doing that, and it ultimately allows for the possibility of replacing actors, performers, broadcast news journalists, etc. We have been accustomed to having these roles for members and for working people who make a living off of that, and technology is shifting and could actually impede the ability of people to gain jobs. So that's the connection between what is...
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, though, with the risk of, with this advent of growing technology. We just saw what there was, the idea of somebody going to shoot a film and people being pulled to the other side saying, can we take your picture? And those pictures could be used and duplicated for other scenes that actor might not even be there to do, right? That was one of our concerns. So let's talk about knowing that this is a threat. How do we as a union, if you can talk about the ways that we really look to protect? And I know, Rebecca, you've been, what's been going on in New York has been really interesting, and you've been really in the forefront of that. So if you can talk a little bit about it, that would be great.
Yeah, I want to just jump in, though, because before we do that, anytime that a principal actor or a background performer finds that they're being scanned on the set, I think it's so important for our members to realize that your first call should be to SAG-AFTRA and to your union, because we always want to make sure, and our staff does this, they talk to the appropriate labor relations people to make sure that those scans have been approved by the union before they're used. So if that happens, that's a key part of what David and his team are doing.
People need to know. We don't want them to be building a library view. As actors, we all just want to work, and we're so excited sometimes that we don't realize the repercussions of eternity. What that could look like.
That's right.
Right. So, yes. So definitely to call the union, but talk about some of the work that you've been doing, because I think it's important for members to know.
So I think this is we're at the intersection of a time where there are a lot of laws, and things like right of publicity is a state-by-state issue currently, and certainly post-mortem right of publicity. And what happens is these things tend to be bound by the jurisdiction in which you live and work, and then ultimately the state jurisdiction of where you might pass away. So what we've been doing in New York is trying to modernize some antiquated laws, and it really does have an impact for how we think about this nationally, because any weakness in this patchwork, while we've got a couple dozen states with decent right of publicity laws, having some that are held back in time and not up to speed with technology really does impact not only our members, but the public at large. So what New York is working on is we had legislation that overwhelmingly passed the Assembly. We're actually going to be back at it again this year, and we're already working on it. It has a post-mortem right of publicity that would be for after 40 years after the death of an individual. New York hasn't had these post-mortem rights for something like 34 years now, which means that performers' families or their heirs are denied the control and the compensation for an unauthorized merchandise and advertisements. At the top of the show, I loved that you referenced Star Wars, Gabrielle. I was so excited to hear you talk about that, because that's an example of where it went right. So in that case, the family, Peter Cushing's family, everybody's very familiar with his early appearance in Star Wars, and then years after his death, them bringing back his character to life, but it was done in a way that was respectful. The family had sign-off. Obviously, there was compensation. Those sort of things were in the mix. However, if that had been an actor that had passed away in New York State, and let's say it wasn't a big company that might choose to do things correctly, or it's a smaller, low-budget thing, the same thing could have happened without permission. And so that's why these kind of things are so important to think about for us as a nationwide union.
Well, I think also one of the things that people don't know is that because some laws aren't federally mandated laws, they're not, like you're saying, state to state, we find that certain states actually lead the way. And so New York will be hopefully leading the way on a national level on that. But I don't know, David, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, I love the details. So Rebecca is a true wonk. She can go into the Assembly bill, et cetera. Just to step back a little bit, legislation is definitely a tool that we have access to, influence, that can be helpful. There's also negotiations, which we do in our collective bargaining agreements. The challenge with negotiations is they only happen every 3 years, and you're trying to grasp something that is a trend that you think is going to stick and become a permanent piece of the landscape, and that's where you want to spin your leverage. So that's difficult. But part of the reason for this podcast is another tool that we have is just information. And to points that both of you have been making, it is so critical that people, beginning with our members, but really the public at large, realize that when they step into a place where there is a scanning or replicating technology going on, along with that goes the signing over of your rights so that they can do exactly what Rebecca was just referring to. They can use your image, use your likeness, use your voice without your authority, most times without your knowledge, and they can use it in ways that might be mortifying to you or to your loved ones who suddenly see your face or some piece of you, your likeness, your voice, etc., in some performance or in some activity that you would never have approved of. So there's lots of different ways that we are having to go about attacking that, but what we see is a emerging space where there really are not a lot of advocates. There aren't a lot of people who pay attention to this. There aren't a lot of groups that are well developed to protect this. We're not the environment where you've got all kinds of societies that have been built up to protect that. That's right.
Yeah.
It's us. This is really largely on us. But the technology is accelerating at such a rapid pace that it's hard to keep up with, and therefore it's easy to ignore. And that's part of the danger of what we're looking at.
I think one of the dangers also is that it's so daunting. It changes so rapidly that people, my sense of it is, tend to step away from it instead of leaning into it, right?
Yes.
So, and that's, we can't afford to do that within our union. But when we went to Carnegie Mellon, what I found was everybody was thrilled and intrigued by the technology, and yet they were looking at all the ways like, oh my God, it's going to kill our work, rather than saying, wait a minute, let's grasp this and see how we can go and make it so we can work with it. Like, how do we move forward?
It's interesting because I love technology, and with that loving technology, I also know that there's a little bit of that Battlestar Galactica playing in the back of my mind. All of this has happened before, and all of it will happen again. And the truth is, we have to really think about it. There are aspects of this that, if we don't put the systems in place, can really be dangerous, not just for our members, but for the public at large, because you could have a situation for broadcasters where there's a really fun Jordan Peele BuzzFeed video with former President Obama.
I saw that.
You see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
So that's an example of something that people can really look to and say, well, here's an interesting way that this has been used, and we all know that didn't really happen. But in the media landscape where news is flying out every second, and social media then spreads it so fast, to be able to spot these things is very important from a public point of view, also for our broadcasters who always are rising to excellence in terms of reporting, real stories, really reporting the truth. So there's those implications. But the piece of it that you mentioned, Gabrielle, that is so clear to me is people do tend to back away, and we can't back away. We can't back away. There's implications in this technology that can help with our enforcement of contracts. And I know that that's something that David and Danny Anukai and the staff team
Tell everybody
have been
who Danny is when you
Danny
say that.
Anukai is our Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. Yeah, and the work that's happening there is getting us to be able to use technology, harness technology, and I think that's been our approach here.
It's important that we don't leave without delivering one or two messages to people who may be listening. First, to our members, when on the job, before you take the job, or when in the industry in one of these shops where you are being scanned for some professional reason, it's really critical to understand the rights that you are signing over that go along with that, and where possible to ensure you are going to be able to monitor how that is used, that you are going to receive notices and the ability to say yes or no. So they've got these shops where you can scan your image in, and they tell you all these wonderful things you'll be able to do once your image and your voice and likeness is in their database. You have to be very careful about that. That's for our members, and also pay attention to the messaging coming out of SAG-AFTRA as we get deeper and deeper into this space. For members at large, or for people who may not be working under our contracts but who are listening to the podcast, it's very important to pay attention to this entire space for issues related to privacy, for your ability to protect yourselves and your families, particularly your children, because there are truly unscrupulous folks out there who are taking images and doing all kinds of nefarious things with them. And also folks who are just profiteers and are willing to make money doing unauthorized things with images and likenesses and voices. So,
you know what's hard for members, and when I'm hearing you say this, and people who aren't members who are just looking to work, is that feeling of, because we do as a union, it's so important for our members to understand, and outside we only know what we're told. So when people share the information, when it's happening, where it's happening, what's going on, that empowers the union to step in,
yes.
Right? That's how we actually recognize the work we need to do in terms of legislation as well. I mean, it bleeds in so many different ways once we're communicated with. But, one of the conflicts or the challenges that members have, and I think it's worthwhile to say it here since you've brought this up, to share things, there's a fear. They're afraid, when they're on the set and they're given a contract, let's say, or they're asked to sign over. And in that moment of saying, am I going to lose the job if I don't sign it right now? Let's talk just for a few moments, because I know it's not technology, but it is dealing with all the things that are thrown at us as performers. And how do we help to empower our members that way? So they're on set. I'm shooting something, and somebody comes to me to sign this, piece of paper. We're going to take some pictures of you, and we're going to, library it for some other scenes down the road or whatever. Well, I didn't know about that.
Right.
Well, you have to do it if you want to go on. What do you say to the actor? What's the way to go, or the performer, or the broadcaster, whoever's dealing with that?
3 things. 1, you know about it in advance. We know the possibility of this in advance. So be prepared so that, in fact, you are not taken by surprise. So that's 1. If you have any possibility of this happening, know that. And particularly if it's happened to you before, get the language that was put in front of you and where you had to sign something away and you didn't like it, and study that language. 2, talk to your agent if you have an agent or a manager or your representative, your lawyer, etc., about it. And 3, talk to us about it.
Right.
Because increasingly our conversations with agents and our conversations with representatives include conversations like this, and we can be smarter about this by giving preparatory seminars and information and placing things on our app and on our website to help people with this. But we're just getting started, and we want to make sure that we have the right information so that we're delivering good advice.
The key, one thing you said, and then Rebecca, I want you to answer this, but this is really important, is I would actually reverse the numbers a little bit. Ask your agent, manager, or whoever is your representative, your lawyer, is there anything I might have to expect on set? I heard that there's a lot of, pictures being taken right now. There's a lot of whatever. Is there anything I should expect right now? Was there any agreement made? That's a good thing to do, because sometimes that can help.
Even better.
Right.
Even better.
Go on, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think David's points are great, but that isn't necessarily the situation that all of our members find themselves on a set. So let's say that it's a background performer who this is their one day on that job. It's 2 things. Calling the union right away and letting them know, oh, hey, the union actually said that you need to work this out through them. I can give you their number.
You can even say, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and I would say,
trouble.
Absolutely blame us and give yourself that cover in that moment to not sign anything that isn't the case. Our staff is so aware of this and so immediately on it. It's just really important that people let people know right away.
It happened the other day, and this is really important. We had a thing going on about a film that was being shot. Background were being asked to go and step into the other room to have pictures taken of them. Somebody let us know. We actually approached it with
the labor relations, absolutely. Our legal department and our government affairs and public policy team, they're on it every time.
We are, but we always want this podcast to be a place where we can speak reality and talk real. And we know that there are plenty of times where, in particular, our background performers don't feel that they are able to make that move in real time. And frankly, I think that requires us as a union working with many of the third parties in the industry and working with producers to find a way to really address that as it relates to this narrow issue. There's lots of other issues out there, but the scanning and the replicating of image and likeness and voice, both for their protection, but also to preserve jobs, because sometimes they do it in order to multiply the image and to employ fewer background actors.
The possible negative aspect of it, not looking at it. We know there's a lot of positive, but that's one of the negatives.
That's
absolutely. Right. So we want to speak to that. What I'd love us to talk about was just recently there was a film project that was being done, and background actors were being pulled aside and they were being asked if they can have their images scanned for future use. And that was something that was going to maybe take place down the road. So if they wanted to create another scene, or they wanted to go and even in another project, they can go and utilize that person's image. And that might be it with no cost, I mean, to the performer being paid anything. And that's what the future potentially could mean if we do something like this.
Right.
So I want us to talk about that.
Absolutely. And that's why when those moments come up, you have to absolutely be in touch with the union right away, because our staff will work with their labor relations department to make sure that they're approved uses that are being used in that project, not for other projects, nothing along those lines.
It underscores the danger of this technology. One, there is unauthorized use generally, and two, there is the possible taking away of roles in other projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought what was wonderful was that we actually did have some members who reached out and anonymously, because this is, again, a concern. They reached out anonymously, and we were able to go and follow up with it so that they were able to have the protections. But yes, this is something on an ongoing basis. And as we move on, we talked a little bit. I just want to make sure we're touching bases with everything, because there's a big topic.
It's a big
in a
topic.
Small, window here, right? But Rebecca, you spoke before about post-mortem legislation, the rights. And I thought if you could touch a little bit more on that, because I don't think people really understand what that means.
Yeah. So one way that this comes up is we'll use an example of a very iconic performer like Prince. When Prince passed away in life, Prince was very clear that there was very limited use of image in the future and how that would happen. You could be putting somebody into work that they might have either morally thought was incorrect. There would be no heir or family compensation. And in fact, that whole credibility of that person, you might have an actor who has sort of branded themselves in one particular way that could be without a postmortem right of publicity that has to at least extend for 40 years. Without that, it leaves that whole time that somebody's built up a career and work that could really be eviscerated. I also think there are implications in life for our broadcasters. And our broadcasters, live this spotlighted life where they go to the grocery store and somebody's going to take a picture. You could live this immaculate and perfect life, be in the middle of breaking a national news story, and because there might be forces out there that would decide that they want to in some way ding your credibility, they, given this technology, can easily put together things that can make somebody look like something they're doing that's not. So verification and some of the work being done with that is really important.
So let me just go a little further with that. That would mean that a broadcast news journalist would be on camera saying something that she would never say, that wasn't actually her story, and the audience would see a trusted individual delivering news about a subject when the actual person was not involved in that at all. It would simply be a replicated image, likeness, voice delivering some type of misinformation with the real person, maybe not even knowing about it until it was too late.
See, I think it's a concern. When you're saying that, my heart is in my throat, because what I think of, it's not just for our broadcasters who clearly, they are the ones who inform our country and our world. So, I mean, I really, to see that kind of thing happen with their work would be devastating. But it happens, I could see this being something that would be potentially dangerous.
Absolutely.
For anybody without these laws. You can talk about politicians, you can talk about
spouses, you can talk about
that's right. Children.
Well,
so
right.
Since everybody now has so many, you don't have to be a high-profile performer or broadcaster, but these things actually do apply to society at large. You only have to have 20 or 30 images. If anybody's ever done an interview on anything or there's a video out there, it is easy to lift from those things. So there are applications where college students are being put in, like, what are these deepfake? It happens to our high-profile members. but it happens to college students as a form of revenge in order to make them appear in things that they didn't appear in. It's bullying, it's harassment, it's all these things that happen.
And we're seeing this kind of work being done with voiceover work too. And this has
Absolutely.
this is a major concern for our membership who does this work, is the idea that they can take a few words that you've said and then they can go and create a whole dialogue that you never said using your voice. And these are the, this is, as a performer, I can say, for me, what it is, the only thing I have is my identity, right? That is my product in which I sell and put it out there. And so the idea that would be something that somebody grabs hold of and suddenly controls and makes it their property, and I have no control over it, that for me is devastating, and why I am so thrilled for all the work that's being done, particularly on a legislative level, because I can't imagine that people think it's all right to take what's mine.
That's right. And for the rest of us, all we have is our reputation. And for someone to be able to damage your reputation before you have any chance to repair it is just a terrible thought. It really underscores the work that we do here at SAG-AFTRA. Legislation is such a big piece of it, but it's so hard for legislation to keep pace with the changing technology and changing economy around. And so we also need to be not just collective bargaining, but informing and doing spot activity. You have to do it on all fronts.
Absolutely.
That's right.
It is communicating. Yeah, and that's what we do.
And that's
right.
That's what we're doing now.
That's right. Well, thank you all. It was great conversation. I think this is one that we could probably have several podcasts on regarding technology, and we will do more on FANG because we just touched it.
It's the FANG and the gig economy. That is a big one that we will also be talking about. But it's really great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming and giving of yourself and your
work,
your wisdom.
Thank you
and
guys.
insight.
It's really amazing to be a part of this effort. We're doing good stuff.
It is good stuff. This was really a great conversation. Technology, clearly this is just a little piece of a big picture. We have down the pipe some plans. David, if you want to.
We do. We started this off by talking about FANG, and FANG represents so many things, but chief among them is the gig economy. And in future podcasts, we will be addressing that directly and doing a deep dive into what that means for all of us and certainly what it means for our membership.
Great. So I hope everybody stays tuned for future podcasts.
And Rebecca, thanks for being here.
Hey,
Really
thank
great.
you guys for having me.
Thank you for all your work. Thank you, both of you.
Okay.
See you later.